Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, distinguished members of the Council, I wish at the outset to warmly congratulate you on behalf of the delegation of the DRC. I'm congratulating you on your presidency of the Security Council for March as the month draws to a close. Thanks to your wisdom, your skill, and your qualities, your sterling qualities as a diplomat, you have successfully steered the work of this council. I also wish to thank your predecessor, Ambassador Fukong. He steered the council's work also equally successfully last month. The Democratic Republic of the Congo welcomes the detailed briefing delivered by the Special Representative of the Secretary General in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ms. Bintou Keita. We also welcome to our meeting the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Rwanda, His Excellency Mr. Olivier Nduhungirehe, and we welcome Madame Charlotte Slente of the Danish Refugee Council. She objectively detailed the hell and the bitter ordeal besetting the Congolese people in areas under control of the Rwandan army and the M23 AFC proxies. Today's statement will focus on the following 4 points: the report of the Secretary General on the situation in Eastern DRC, the implementation of Resolution 2773 of the Security Council, peace initiatives already underway, and the adoption of sanctions as measures with which to implement Resolution 2773 of the Security Council. Madam President, thousands of people have been killed, thousands of people have been internally displaced, entire cities have been devastated. Walikale, Kamanyola, Bunagana, Masisi-Centre, Goma, Minova, Ijwi, and Bukavu. In a humanitarian context which is chaotic on all fronts, the east of the DRC yet again offers a particularly distressing spectacle. The Secretary General's report, issued as document S/2025/176, has been circulated to your council, and it says the very same. Rwandan Defense Forces and the AFC M23 proxies have crossed our borders. They have occupied strategic locations, turfed people from their homes, and established a parallel administration. They continue to flagrantly violate, in so doing, the DRC's sovereignty. In its communiqué issued on the 15th of March 2025, the Ministry of the Interior, Security, Decentralization and Customary Affairs of the Democratic Republic of the Congo documented a series of atrocities perpetrated by the Rwandan Defense Forces and the M23 AFC proxies in North Kivu and South Kivu, this in violation of the relevant provisions of Resolution 2773, adopted on the 21st of February 2025. These acts have caused the huge loss of human life and mass destruction. The communiqué quite rightly documented that between the 10th and 14th of March 2025, there were 62 cases of targeted killings and summary executions in the areas under occupation. Moreover, there were 17 cases of violations and numerous cases of pillaging on the part of the Rwandan forces and their allies. Among the most striking incidents, the Rwandan army and the M23 AFC coalition staged a second incursion, I did say a second incursion, into the CBCA Ndusho hospital on the 10th of March. During that event, they abducted around 100 patients and healthcare workers who were later summarily executed. The communique aforementioned also reports the death of Mr. Fikri Mushuko Antoine, the head of the Mfui Matanda group. He was abducted from the CBCA Ondosho hospital on the 3rd of March and tortured for 7 days by Rwandan soldiers. Madam President, this alarming situation underscores the urgent need to implement to the letter the provisions of Resolution 2773 of the Security Council. This in order to put an end to the violence and protect the civilians in the regions affected. This bleak, unfortunate picture is being painted more than a month after the Security Council, through its Resolution 2773, unanimously called upon the Rwandan Defense Forces to withdraw immediately from the territory of the Democratic Republic of the Congo unconditionally. The resolution also demanded that they cease to support the M23. It too must withdraw from Goma, Bukavu, and all areas under their control, and entirely dismantle the illegitimate parallel administrations that have been established on the territory of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The unanimous adoption, says the Speaker, on the 21st of February 2025 of Resolution 2773 was a significant step forward in efforts to resolve the crisis and restore a lasting peace in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This peace involves restoring the Congolese state's authority across all occupied provinces in North Kivu and South Kivu in their entirety. The resolution stands as a response to the security and humanitarian crises and challenges which are dealing a heavy blow to the people in the east of our country that for 30 years now have been in the grips of violence. The text is also an expression of clear and explicit support from the international community to the efforts taken by the AU, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, SADC, and the East African Community. Far from hindering African initiatives, Resolution 2773 strengthens and supplements them. The extent and persistent nature of the aforementioned violence suggests that we can no longer allow this crisis to drag on for eternity, claiming that an African problem requires an African solution. Doing that would be to betray the spirit of international solidarity, which is the very bedrock of the United Nations collective security system. Now is the time to recall that the Democratic Republic of the Congo legitimately expects this council to resolutely and diligently finish the work it started here on the 21st of February 2025, work to protect international peace and security in accordance with the tenets of the United Nations Charter. In other words, the Council must now implement Resolution 2773. That is and must be a priority. To date, no Rwandan soldier has withdrawn from the DRC's territory. No element of the M23 AFC coalition has withdrawn from Goma or Bukavu, nor from any other area under control, and no parallel administration, illegitimate parallel administration indeed, has been dismantled. On the contrary, every day we're seeing the positions held by the RDF M23 AFC coalitions growing stronger. They tirelessly continue their expansionist and criminal agenda. They are hungry to defy the Security Council's will in so doing, and through their actions they are killing peace-building efforts undertaken by regional leaders, including those of the AU, SADC, and the ERC, as well as others by the international community as a whole. After having established a parallel administration in Goma in North Kivu and in Bukavu in South Kivu, the RDF AFC M23 coalition extended its territorial conquest to the Walikale territory in North Kivu and to Mwenga in South Kivu. And this happened at a time when appeals were growing in number for a ceasefire. This means that the aforementioned coalition is brazenly impertinent in violating its own ceasefire. Worse still, this coalition is now maliciously transplanting non-indigenous populations under the guise of refugee return, and that has paved the way for interethnic tensions, which we're very likely to see in the future. The coalition has also readied itself to sell off DRC's monetary sovereignty by looking to appoint a parallel banking regulation system and a parallel central bank. This is true if we are to believe statements made to the press by the coalition's leader on the 22nd of March. Madam President, the DRC wishes to thank and congratulate His Excellency João Manuel Rosso, President of the Republic of Angola. He demonstrated resolute commitment in his role as AU-appointed mediator for the conflict which is pitting the DRC against Rwanda. Contrary to the recalcitrance of Rwanda, the DRC is highly committed, as is its head of state, His Excellency Félix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo. We are committed to the peace initiatives of the AU and sub-regional economic commissions. That commitment is unswerving. Our support extends to the joint SADC-EAC summit that adopted the report on the conclusions of the ministerial summit held on the 17th of March in Zimbabwe. That summit also ordered the implementation of the roadmap. The Luanda process, designed to offer a framework within which to achieve a peaceful resolution to the conflict, was sabotaged by Rwanda's stubbornness. Every commitment that they entered into in Luanda has been ridden roughshod over time and time again. Her Excellency Madame Therese Kwalikamba Wagner, Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Francophonie of the DRC, reiterated time and time again before this council a few weeks ago the fact that since the establishment of the enhanced ad hoc verification mechanism in Goma in November 2025, Rwanda has not once sent its 3 military experts to oversee the implementation of the ceasefire. On the 15th of December 2024, Rwanda knowingly sabotaged the summit convened by the facilitator of this process, His Excellency João Lourenço, by ignoring his invitation to the meeting. Moreover, on the 23rd of January, Rwanda surprised the entire world by requesting that Turkey act as mediator. In so doing, they strayed from the principle African solutions to African problems. As we might have expected, Rwanda and its proxies, who said that they swore only by direct negotiations between the RDC and AFC M23, were the first to boycott the Luanda meeting on the 18th of March. Despite this flagrant disregard shown by Rwanda for peace processes underway, the Democratic Republic of the Congo remains fully committed and reiterates its trust in any and all peace processes supported by the African Union to bring about a political solution to the conflict between the DRC and Rwanda. Two sub-regions, SADC and the EAC, have held joint meetings to adopt urgent measures, including a ceasefire. As far as the African Union is concerned, its Peace and Security Council met at heads of state level on the 14th of February. It called for the immediate withdrawal of all uninvited foreign forces from DRC, in other words, Rwanda. Rwanda and the M23 responded and continue to respond with violence, with terror. Indiscriminate, systematic violence continues to be seen. The victims of that violence hail from all ethnic groups and are of all political colours. We are seeing the rapid deterioration of the situation on the ground. And many stakeholders have reacted by doing what they do best. They've documented human rights violations, paving the way for criminal prosecutions. This is robust action, but is reactive rather than preemptive. Madam President, on a different note, we cannot lose sight of the fact that the speedy, gradual, ordered and responsible withdrawal of MONUSCO continues to be in sync with the logic underpinning the disengagement note co-signed on the 21st of November 2023 by the government of the DRC and MONUSCO. It was endorsed by the Security Council pursuant to Resolution 2717 of the 19th of December. There was momentum for disengagement, which began in South Kivu on the 25th of June 2024. It was brutally deflated following attacks on FARDC and MONUSCO positions by the RDF-AFC M23 coalition. However, parties remain committed to the comprehensive implementation of the joint disengagement plan on the humanitarian track now. Paragraphs 49 to 53 of the Secretary-General's report confirm that the situation is a devastating one, a situation incidentally worsened greatly by RDF M23 AFC attacks. Against this backdrop, one of our major challenges remains mobilizing remaining funds to meet colossal need. We take this opportunity to reiterate our appeal to donors. We ask them to step up their efforts to plug the funding gap. More or less 93% of the funding needed is still lacking. The Humanitarian Response Plan for 2025 was launched jointly on the 27th of February by the government and its partners. It seeks to assist more or less 11 million people of the 21.2 million that currently are in need. The estimated budget stands at $2.54 billion, but has only been financed to date to the tune of 7%. Madam President, as regards the human rights track, my government wishes to draw the Council's attention to the continued worsening of the human rights situation in areas under the control of the RDF M23 AFC coalition. In particular, certain worrying incidents have been corroborated in the Secretary-General's report. I request you to peruse paragraphs 35 to 40. Several other human rights and IHL violations were reported as having been perpetrated by the RDF M23 AFC coalition. Here I'd recall in this connection the killing of at least 126 people in areas controlled by M23 since the 26th of January, abductions of civilians, forced recruitment of young people, including children, and the fact that they've been subjected to forced labor in Goma and the surrounding area. I'd also point to the unilateral destruction and dismantling by the aforementioned coalition of internally displaced camps that were havens protected by the UN in North Kivu and South Kivu. Several other cases are worthy of mention, of course. Targeted attacks by way of reprisals against women activists, human rights defenders, sexual and gender-based violence, and attacks against peacekeepers, MONUSCO peacekeepers. We cannot ignore these incidents. In view of the horror and the climate of terror described above, my delegation urges the Council to face the truth. There is an urgent need to rapidly move to the implementation of the provisions of Resolution 2773. An effective cessation of hostilities and de-escalation will not be possible until increased pressure is brought to bear, or until there are more robust sanctions against Rwanda and its M23 AFC allies. Madam President, I would be remiss if I did not recall before your Council that as we meet here, Rwanda has more than half of its army deployed on the territory of the DRC. And this has occurred without the consent of the Congolese state. The right to self-defense cannot be invoked as a justification for an armed invasion, nor for the creation of parallel administrations on the territory of a sovereign state. These acts, in and of themselves, are grave violations of the United Nations Charter, the the Constitutive Act of the African Union, and of Resolution 3314 of the UN General Assembly, dated 14th of December 1974. Madam President, it's not my job to recall that when the Council unanimously adopted its Resolution 2773 on the 21st of February, a significant number of Council members stated that they would ensure that it was implemented in its entirety. They stated then that the Council reserved the right to contemplate the imposition of other measures were the resolution not fully implemented. My delegation is of the view that the Council measures envisaged for such circumstances must include a series of sanctions. The most pressing of these are as follows. 1. Due to Rwanda's persistent refusal to comply with Resolution 2773, the Security Council should firmly condemn this blatant violation and consider submitting to the International Court of Justice a request for an advisory opinion in accordance with the provisions of Article 96 of the United Nations Charter. Moreover, the Council should study the implementation of a reinforced mechanism to monitor the implementation of Resolution 2773, with gradually more stringent coercive measures being put in place in the case of continued non-compliance. 2. Establish a regime of sanctions applicable to Rwanda and its leaders. 3. Impose an arms embargo on Rwanda until it ceases its support for M23 and until it totally withdraws its army from the DRC's territory. 3. Call upon the 1533 DRC Sanctions Committee to be guided by Operative Paragraph 9 of Resolution 2773 to implement a gamut of UN sanctions, this in accordance with Resolution 2293 of 2016. Sanctions that should be imposed namely against people thought to be perpetuating conflict in the eastern DRC. 4. Establish a regime of much more severe sanctions to be imposed on M23 AFC, given excessive human rights violations perpetrated in the areas under their occupation. 3. To heed the request made in letters submitted by the DRC to the Security Council and the UN Secretary General. That letter saw my government call for the withdrawal of Rwanda's status as a TCC contributing to peacekeeping missions of the United Nations, because it is not worthy of that status. Finally, decry and sanction the involvement of Rwandan authorities in the illegal exploitation of natural resources, both mining and agricultural resources, owned by the DRC. Before I conclude, I must reiterate my government's thanks and the thanks of the DRC's people to the states and institutions that have courageously imposed sanctions against Rwanda. This includes the US, the UK, Germany, Canada, the European Union in general, and France, Belgium, Slovenia, and Greece in particular. Finally, we must here recognize that sanctions in the cases of the Great Lakes crisis are not counterproductive. It is for this reason we encourage the Security Council and other peace-loving states to follow suit. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Democratic Republic of Congo for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Olivier Nduhungirehe, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Rwanda.
Madam President, Council members, I thank you for giving me the floor. Allow me to begin by congratulating you on your presidency and leadership over this Council during the month of March 2025. I also acknowledge the contributions of previous speakers and briefers. As a member state of the United Nations and a prominent contributor to peace support mission, Rwanda stands in firm support to peacekeeping and peacekeepers wherever they are and wherever they serve. This is precisely why Rwanda insists on accountability and transparency for all those who are mandated by the UN Security Council to serve the cause of peace. Allow me here to bring more clarity on the conflict in Eastern DRC. This conflict was not started by Rwanda, but the burden has been placed squarely on Rwanda's shoulder. In addition, actions taken by different actors have enabled the DRC to escape its responsibilities, particularly as regards to leadership and governance failures. The root causes of this conflict go back first to the continued preservation of the FDLR genocidal militia, despite its record of ethnic massacres, recruitment of child soldiers, and destabilization of both Rwanda and the DRC. It is unfortunate that some in the international community conveniently continue to ignore its existence. The recent capture and handover to Rwanda of FDLR members, including a senior commander, has provided even more evidence of how the DRC government integrated FDLR fighters into its national army. Kinshasa gave them weapons, resources, and a platform to continue their genocide ideology. Secondly, the systematic persecution that Congolese Kinyarwanda speakers, particularly Tutsi communities, is linked to colonial legacy. This includes communities in South Kivu and Ituri provinces. Among the consequences of the discrimination, violence, and ethnic cleansing in the DRC are the hundreds of thousands of refugees in Rwanda, Uganda, and other countries in our region that have been living mostly in refugee camps, unable to safely return to their homes for many years. Given the situation, what is to be expected from Rwanda? Why is Rwanda disproportionately targeted? It is not clear. What is clear to us in Rwanda is that the defensive measures we have put in place will remain until there is a credible framework for long-term security guarantees along our border with the DRC. Madam President, the case of MONUSCO has been particularly troubling, as reflected in the report we have just received. There has been a recurrent pattern of MONUSCO's deliberations being used to push a narrative that fails to reflect reality on the ground. Sadly, today's report is no exception. While it accurately cites abusive armed groups like the ADF, Codeco, the Kinshasa-backed FDLR, genocidal militia, and even DRC forces as the main perpetrators of human rights violations, the report continues to single out other actors as the primary cause of instability in Eastern DRC. As such, the report shows a clear pattern of bias in the reporting of the security crisis in that region. MONUSCO's long-standing failure to implement the mandate it was entrusted with 25 years ago, that is the eradication of all armed groups, including the FDLR genocidal militia, which has operated with total impunity in Eastern DRC for the past 3 decades. We cannot hope to achieve peace if the root causes of this crisis are not addressed. I was personally sitting in this council on 28th of March 2013 when Resolution 2098 was adopted to deploy a Force Intervention Brigade, FIB, within MONUSCO, with a specific mandate to neutralize all armed groups, including the FDLR. However, operational focus was exclusively directed at the M23, and MONUSCO FIB refused to neutralize the FDLR, which continued to create havoc in Eastern DRC even today in 2025. In fact, since 2003, this Council has reiterated the need to address the threat of the FDLR through more than 20 different resolutions. Yet, after billions of dollars spent on what remains the UN's most expensive peacekeeping mission in history, meaningful results remain elusive. As a result, Congolese civilians, especially Tutsi, have continued to be targeted for persecution, discrimination, and forced displacement. In October 2023, a whole village, 300 homes of Congolese Tutsi, was burned down by DRC-backed militias in Turo village, Masisi territory. And where was MONUSCO at that time? Since February this year, the Banyamulenge villages in South Kivu, Minembwe, South Kivu, are being bombed by attack drones and fighter jets from DRC. Where is MONUSCO? And there is an issue of governance and political inclusion that needs to be addressed by DRC. Madam President, since the resurgence of hostilities in October 2021, MONUSCO has failed to contribute constructively to the escalation or to peace efforts. More alarmingly, MONUSCO provided direct support to the military operation of the DRC coalition, placing itself in a situation of belligerence, even sometimes fighting alongside the same groups it was created to neutralize. I should here note the presence of European mercenaries in this coalition, those mercenaries who were deployed in violation of a UN Convention of 1989 and who were working alongside the DRC Army and MONUSCO. Rwanda has raised these concerns repeatedly before this Council, but they have never been addressed. SRSG Bintu Keita and MONUSCO have also contributed to the distortion of facts surrounding recent developments. Widely exaggerated claims of 3,000 civilian casualties were circulated by MONUSCO officials following the capture of Goma in January 2025. These figures, contested by journalists and humanitarian workers on the ground, have been weaponized by the government of the DRC to call for punitive measures against Rwanda. And you just heard another sample of fabricated claims by my colleague from DRC. Nonetheless, Rwanda continues to believe that MONUSCO can still change its course and play a positive role, provided that it abides by its mandate to protect civilians, ensure humanitarian assistance, and possibly providing logistical support to the joint EAC-SADC efforts currently under discussion. Madam President, since the last briefing in December 2024 and the fall of Goma, there is a new momentum for peace in the region. The first ever EAC-SADC summit took place on 8th February 2025 in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The joint summit, whose outcomes were endorsed by the African Union, decided to merge the Luanda and Nairobi processes. It was a merger, not a harmonization as heard in this council. And the summit also renewed the call for a cessation of hostilities and inclusive political dialogue. This dialogue will be guided by an enlarged panel of 5 facilitators from across Africa under the stewardship of the African Union chairperson. Rwanda welcomes and fully supports these developments. In particular, we welcome the recent decision of the AFC M23 to reposition its forces from Walikale in support of peace initiatives underway, as well as the DRC's announcement that all offensive operations by FRDC and Wazalendo will be halted. We further urge the international community and the Security Council to support this African-led process. To conclude, Madam President, I would like to reiterate that for the last 31 years, Rwanda has worked hard to build unity, reconciliation, stability, and economic growth to promote the rights of vulnerable groups across the board. A sustainable political solution with long-term security guarantees for Rwanda will allow us to get back to the serious and urgent work of developing our country and integrating our region together with our neighbors. Rwanda has always wanted a lasting political and security settlement for the region. In this regard, we are committed to working with all parties to ensure that we stick to commitments made, particularly the joint EAC-SADC summit process and other complementary confidence-building initiatives. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Rwanda, and I now give the floor to the representative of Angola.
Madam President, distinguished members of the Security Council, allow us, first of all, to salute you, Madam President, for organizing this debate on the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and the work carried out by United Nations Stabilization Mission in DRC, MONUSCO. We welcome the presence of His Excellency Oliver Nduhungirehe, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Republic of Rwanda, and His Excellency Ambassador Zanon Mukongo Ngai, Permanent Representative of DRC to the United Nations. We will also welcome Burundi's participation in this meeting. We thank the Honorable Madame Bintou Keita, Special Representative of UN Secretary General for the DRC and Head of MONUSCO, for presenting the relevant report of the Secretary General of MONUSCO. We share the concerns expressed in the political, defense and security, protection of civilians and human rights fields, and take note of the observations contained in the report. We will also avail the opportunity to welcome the participation of Ms. Charlotte Slent, Secretary General of the Danish Refugee Council. Madam President, Angola remains very concerned about the situation in eastern DRC and the continued advance and consequent occupation of territory by M23. These actions, which are occurring despite ongoing regional and international efforts towards a political and negotiated solution to the conflict, compromise peace and stability in DRC, puts its sovereignty and integrity at risk, worsen the humanitarian situation, and threaten security in the Great Lake regions and on the continent. In the meantime, this Council, on the 21st February, unanimously adopted Resolution 2773, which strongly condemns the offensive by M23 in the North and South Kivu provinces of DRC, urges it to immediately cease hostilities, withdraw from areas it controls, and fully revest the establishment of a legitimate parallel administration in that country's territory. Madam President, allow us to highlight 2 points about the situation in DRC. First, achievements of mediation mandate by the African Union. In May 2022, the African Union, AU, mandated His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, as President of the International Conference on the Great Lake region, to mediate the political crisis between DRC and Rwanda. At the end of several rounds of negotiations, by December 2024, the Luanda process had already recorded notable progress, which must be preserved within the framework of efforts to achieve peace and stability in the Eastern DRC. An Angola, DRC, Rwanda tripartite presidential summit was scheduled for 15 December in Luanda, Angola, with the aim of finalizing and consolidating the peace agreement. However, this ended up not happening due to a disagreement regarding the resolution of the M23 issue, as Rwanda insisted that it be addressed, while the DRC considered it did not fit into the framework of the Luanda process. It should be noted that the progress achieved under the Luanda process create a new dynamic and urgency in advancing the Nairobi process, a diplomatic mechanism responsible for addressing issues related to the different armed groups operating in DRC, including M23. Angola has always believed in the need, in parallel with efforts to normalize relations between DRC and Rwanda, to also take place direct negotiations between the government of DRC and the M23 as part of the peace process. With full consent and in coordination with both parties, Angola mediation created the condition for the first round of direct talks to take place in Rwanda on 18 March. However, at the last minute, such meeting did not take place due to several factors, some of them external and foreign to an African solution to this conflict. Second, relevance of the Luanda-Nairobi process. The understanding reached to date within the framework of the Luanda process constitutes a solid and comprehensive political basis capable of advancing efforts to promote peace in Eastern DRC. The AU Commission recognized that the Luanda process has contributed significantly to creating conditions for dialogue and regional and international engagement, offering a valuable platform for fostering mutual understanding in pursuit of peace, security, and stability in Eastern DRC. Within this renewed attention and international engagement that the situation requires, particularly at the level of this Council, Angola considers to have fulfilled the essential part of the mandate given by the AU to facilitate the resolution of the crisis between the DRC and Rwanda. Almost 2 months after assuming the pro tempore presidency of the African Union, His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, feels the need to dedicate himself fully to the priorities of the continental agenda, which include issues of peace and security. Madam President, for Angola, the strict observance of the ceasefire agreed between the parties, the immediate cessation of all hostilities, the implementation of concepts of operation of the harmonized plan for the neutralization of the FDLR, and the lifting of Rwanda defensive measures, and the deployment of reinforced verification mechanisms constitute fundamental steps towards a peaceful resolution of the conflict in Eastern DRC. We welcome the ongoing regional efforts at the level of the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, and the East African Community, EAC, and the diplomatic initiatives aimed at achieving lasting peace in Eastern DRC. In conclusion, Angola recognized the importance of diplomatic initiatives by the United Nations, other international bodies, and countries of goodwill that are interested in contributing to the consolidation of the progress and supporting ongoing efforts for a peaceful resolution of the crisis in DRC, as long as these are aligned and coordinate with the AU agenda in the spirit of African solutions to African problems. In this regard, we reaffirm the position of the African Union Commission that all initiatives should be designed to complement and reinforce existing Africa-led mechanisms, ensuring coherence, ownership, and effectiveness in addressing the challenges prevailing in the continent. Angola takes this opportunity to reaffirm its engagement to continue working with all stakeholders and sharing its political experience as part of regional and international efforts aimed at resolving the conflict in the Eastern DRC. As the African Union champion for peace and reconciliation in Africa and chair of the African Union, His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic